Good morning, everyone. And as I said in the first night, I'm glad that it's still morning. We're only a few minutes late. Thank you all for coming here, and of course, people who've been here as part of this workshop and conference for the past 2 days. This panel was something that we envisioned as a kind of check on the work that we were doing as academics and as intellectuals, talking about ethics and moral theology, and realizing we really needed to hear from people who were doing charity and community engagement work on the ground, in the world, in the real world, right, rather than just in the academic world. And so we're very grateful to our 5 presenters today, who will all speak for about 10 minutes or so, and then we will open it up for discussion. So our first speaker today is Dr. Yaqub Mirza, who's president and chief executive officer of Sterling Management Group. He has more than 4 decades of experience in residential and commercial real estate development and property management. He is also the author of 5 Pillars of Prosperity, Essentials for Faith-Based Wealth Building. He is the president and CEO of Marjack Investments, and he makes proprietary investments in U.S. foreign securities and provides international business management services. In addition, Dr. Mirza holds a number of board appointments with several for-profit and not-for-profit entities, as well as academic institutions, including our own here today. In 2002, he was awarded the Entrepreneur Award by the Islamic Chamber of Commerce. And he also has an award. He's also an award recipient at the Byrd Distinguished Entrepreneur Speaker Series. And so we welcome him today. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Maryam. Maria and I, we go back, I think, about 16 years. It's a pleasure to be here. As you can tell from my resume, I'm confused. I don't know what I am and what is my role today and what I should be doing. So I put some notes together, and perhaps in the answer question session we can clarify or add some more. So I tried to focus on some of my experience in business with different countries, different places. First of all, I met a scholar in the mid-70s, and he looked at me and he said, "You are going to go to heaven." I was very surprised. And so I asked him, he said, well, he told me this, he said, "If people are pleased with you, then God will be pleased with you." And of course, the reverse is also true. So it really shaped my life, that what does it take to be nice? Just be nice to people and practice Islamic ethics, so naturally you will be nice. So that really, put me on a path. Anything I did since then, I kept in mind what are our ethics and what is our Islamic values and how I can put that in action. We started Amana Mutual Fund, which is based on Islamic principles. One of the very first fund we launched in '86. Now it has become the largest fund in the world, and with 6 billion assets. Both the top funds are 5-star rated. Then we looked at how can we help in economic and financial situations of our members or of our communities. So we started, as a student we needed a place to invest, so that's Amana. Then we said, now we want to buy cars and houses. So we said, all right, let's look into starting an Islamic mortgage company. We did that like 15, 16 years ago, and now we are offering Islamic mortgages in 25 states. So really, what I'm saying is that in every action, everything, I think I do Islamic ethics or ethics in general, because other faiths also have ethics. They are in practice. I use Islamic ethics to manage businesses. For example, in Chile, we had a juice concentrate factory. We used to sell to Coca-Cola and F.A.I.T.H and Marts and all those people. And they're all good Catholics. I had very good relationship with them. So the general manager one day came to me and he said, this person is not behaving, I'm going to fire him. And I told him, this is your decision, you're general manager. I will accept it as chairman of the board. But go home and think about it. As a good Catholic, will you do that? So the next morning he came to the office and he said, you're right, I thought about it. I don't think what he did warranties to be fired. We were involved in Zimbabwe in dairy operation and yeast, khmira. So as soon as we acquired the farms, dairy farms, and fattening of beef and all that stuff, this is 85, we had very large and very profitable tobacco farming. And when we looked at it, our board decided that we cannot continue to have tobacco in our farm. So my next trip to Zimbabwe, I told Ray Evan, our general manager, that please cut off all the tobacco plants. He was begging me. He said, Yaqub, this is my most profitable product. How could I do that? I said, no, I'm sorry. Our ethics don't allow that we profit from the misery of the other people. In one of my trips to Chile, they presented to me that we can make $500,000 profit if we ferment the juice not to the level that it becomes alcohol, but one stage before that. And I looked at the project. I told them, no, we cannot do that. We'll sacrifice $500,000 profit, but it doesn't feel good that we ferment it. That's not the business we are in. Now, the very interesting thing is that, without telling these people, they already understand and know what our ethics are. So, for example, one time I went to see Banco de Chile vice president, and in Chile they live on 3 W's, women, wine, and weather. And I keep telling them I can only have one, that's weather. They live on wine. Wine is like water there. And in the meeting, I was expecting that they would serve wine, but they did not. So I asked my general manager, Sergio, what happened? He said, well, he said, I told them, don't serve wine because Yaqub is coming to the meeting. All right? So it's very interesting that I didn't tell them that, but they themselves observed. Talking about wine, a couple of weeks ago, we were invited Tracy Fitzsimmons home. She's the president of Shenandoah University, honoring my daughter. And I just indicated to her that, as you know, we don't like wine since you're inviting most of us as Muslims. We prefer that you don't serve wine. And she said, Yaqub, just say so. I'm happy not to serve any wine. And she did not. Now, the book which Maria has mentioned, you can get a copy of, electronic copy from Maria. I sent it to her. In that one, I talked about our role to the community. In the introduction, I say, after the immediate family receives benefit from these resources, and when any extended family, for example, aunts, uncles, in-laws, cousins, who are in need have been helped, our assistance should then extend to the larger community. For Muslims living in North America or Europe today, and this is my opinion, the larger community includes people of other faiths, particularly the other 2 Abrahamic faiths, Judaism and Christian. So personally, I'm a very non-traditional person running charities. I don't run a charity, but I support them, I work for them, I do so many different things. So really, if we follow the ethics and we be true to what we believe in, God blesses. And I always say, why do we make an investment which violates every principle of God and then expect that God will make it profitable? It's not going to happen. So really, that's the core. And Short term, yes, we lost $500,000 here, $500,000 there, but long term, the blessing of God has been such that we were able to create one of the largest endowment in the world, which is controlled by a Muslim group. And now it's close to about $500 million. So, I joined the board of Shenandoah University in 2015. Last year, one of the executive secretary, she came to me and she said, Yaqub, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, we are told that we are not supposed to hug you, and we are big huggers. So what is the reason? So of course I make a joke. I told her I have a very jealous wife. I hope she doesn't mind. So of course then I continue to tell her the Islamic reason that why I don't hug. In Chile, the tradition is they kiss each other. That's the Spanish tradition, and thank God nobody ever kissed me there for 20 odd years. I guess I'm not that good looking. No, my life here, first 1970 to 84, I've been involved with the MSA, then ISNA, then North American Islamic Trust, Association of Muslim Social Sciences Engineers, and so on and so forth. Then we started the new phase, starting from, 1984 to 2000. We created a charity called SAL Foundation. We raised about $100 million and invested that in lots of countries here, Canada, Chile, Egypt, Ivory Coast, Malaysia, Morocco, Turkey, Zimbabwe. And our approach was to do social entrepreneurship. We invest money, introduce know-how, technology to that country, provide job opportunities, make some money, and then use for charitable purposes. Unfortunately, because of corruption, devaluation, and all what you know of, this model really did not work except in one or two countries. So then we took a different approach. We said, all right, let's divest from those countries, take our losses, and invest here. And if we want to help any country, we evaluate the project and we will fund that project. So that's what I'm doing since 2000 until 2017. Our investments range real estate, poultry, technology, stocks, mortgages, ski resorts, you name it. So alhamdulillah, that has done well, and that's where the large endowment has been created. 2018 to onward, I've taken a slightly different road, and that is that 5 families, we said we are going to get together and we are going to take a different direction, especially after some changes happen in IIIT. And we are going to, invest together and then support some of the Islamic work. We focus on education, poverty, social justice, and community building. So our big ticket items are, Irman is here, she may not like it, is CSCW, where we have teacher training program, imam training programs, prophetic pedagogy, faith-based pedagogy, Maqasidi approach to tafsir of Quran, and that's done by Jas Rauda. Virtual reality of Hajj, we are developing that. And then we are offering scholarships to imams' children, because I feel very much for those imams, poor imams. They are paid less than market, overworked, mistreated, their families are sacrificing, and so on and so forth. So at Shenandoah University, we have Bazanji Institute at Shenandoah University, improving higher education in Muslim majority countries. And thank God we have here AbuSulayman Global Center for Islamic Studies, headed by Maryam. Thank you. Then faith, we'll be hearing from Tanveer, one of the projects very dear to us. Then projects which are less than $100,000 is Maqasid Institute doing research on what is higher intent of Sharia. We are giving scholarships to people of color. There were teacher shortages, so we said we will give 10 scholarships, 5,000 each, to people of color to become teachers. Here at Shenandoah University, we support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'm taking a leading role in making sure that those people are helped. Because in every board, we always talk about why don't we have diversification? And every time we meet, we have similar-looking people, but unless we promote and help people of color to get education and have the opportunity to compete, this gap is never going to be built. So that's what we are focused on. How much time I have? It's only over.
Sorry, just a few minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. We are very kind. So we always look for projects which have impact. And we are very thrifty. We spend very little money, and we want maximum results out of it. That's what I'm trained for as a business person. By the way, any business we run is ethical. It doesn't have any loans from any bank, and they are the best in their own field in the United States. And this is really phenomenal. How can you require a company which is at the bottom of the barrel and bring it to compete with all the other companies in the United States and make them the first, second, and third? So then we, as a family, we like to help community members. And there are so many ways you can do that. When a child is born, we don't give them a box of diapers or a bag of diapers because everybody's doing that. So we tell them, okay, get your Social Security number and get the birth certificate. So we then contribute to their education savings account, whether it's $500 or $1,000, because that child, when it grows, this money will grow, and if parents put more money in it, they may have enough to pay for the education. Many people in the community we see, they are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have IRAs or Roth IRAs. So you ask them to establish Roth IRAs, and you put money in it, it grows for them. I was just looking at some statements. As of December, some of the people we sponsored, they had $200,000 plus in their accounts. And that's pretty good money to supplement Social Security and so on and so forth. And then we support many other organizations, all of you know, ISPU, ISNA, CARE, others and others. And one project I will mention, since Sharik is here, I strongly feel that concept of zakah is almost misunderstood. And it needs to be understood properly. We always talk about needy and the poor, but we forget about 6 other categories which are there. And especially in North America, we need to have research done. What is the relevance of zakah to our American situation? We talk about one category is to remove people from bondage. So what does that mean? When I give a political contribution to a politician to get their help to do that, like we did in Asaf Ghafoor's case, can I use the zakah money? If I have to hire an attorney to get somebody out of prison, can I use zakah money? So these are some of the questions which we want to answer. So we sponsored a research with Sharik, and we are hoping to get some answers to it. I really feel it's such an important subject. We should be collecting. Zakah we are collecting, in my judgment or calculation, is 10% of what we should be collecting. And if we are able to collect 100% of zakah, I think we can change, the face of the earth in terms of poverty and lack of education and others. So that's your task. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Maryam.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mirza, for that. And now I have the honor to introduce Dr. Tanveer Mirza, who is one of the founding members of Faith Social Services based here in Northern Virginia. And she's been doing humanitarian work almost her whole life. She received her MD from Dow Medical College in Karachi, and Dr. Mirza was honored as an outstanding citizen of Fairfax County and was named 2010 Fairfax Lady of the Year. She has been a board member of the Al Dulles Area Muslim Society, or Adam Center, for 12 years. And Dr. Mirza was invited by the White House for a special event on unemployment insurance. She has worked with many organizations to help refugees, especially for many years. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you, Maria, for your introduction. So, I have a short speech, and then I have annual report 2021. You might find it on your table. We'll follow it a little bit. So, today I'd like to introduce you to a woman. Let's call her Tahira, a teacher's aide in the school system. She, her husband, and 4 kids live in Northern Virginia. One day, suddenly, Tahira's husband has a massive heart attack and unfortunately passes away. I know many women like Tahira in the early 1980s, women who found themselves in need unexpectedly, their lives overturned by a crisis or a tragedy. I turned to my faith and the Islamic religious texts to better understand how to be helpful in such situations. In our Islamic tradition, one of the 5 pillars is zakah. Zakat or obligatory charity. And it plays 4 important roles in the society. The first is that it is a testimony to the oneness of Allah, or Tawheed. We are one ummah of humanity, one ummah of Muslims. We are connected by Tawheed. Allah says in the Quran in Surah 21, Ayah 92, "Verily, this brotherhood of yours is a single brotherhood, and I am your Lord and cherisher. Therefore, serve me and no one else." Second, zakat is an expression of Allah's mercy. It is an obligation on us to give a prescribed portion of our wealth to the needy. Allah said to the Prophet in the Quran in Surah 21, Ayah 107, "We sent thee not, but as a mercy for all creatures." Third, it's an acknowledgement that to Allah belongs all things. We only have temporary ownership of things around us, and we serve as a caretaker, a khalifa. In Surah Al-Imran, Ayah 26, we hear how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say, "O Allah, Lord of power. O Allah, Lord of power, thou givest power to whom you wish, and you strip of power from whom you wish. Thou endows honor to whom you please, and brings low whom you please. In thy hand is all good. Verily, over all things you have power." Fourth, zakat is an expression of justice, al-adl, by bringing balance to the society. This is not to take away striving for success, but preventing imbalance and exploitation. There are 8 buckets in zakat. The goal is to make the recipient self-sufficient. It is a holistic approach. As I reflected on the Islamic traditions related to zakah, it inspired me to join with others to establish F.A.I.T.H social services, which is grounded in this worldview. It is a 501c3 organization dedicated to serving clients who fall into the 8 categories of zakah in a holistic manner. Tahira was one such client. She came to us in her moment of need. She received financial assistance, clothing from our thrift store, food from our food pantry. Her children benefited from our children's program. We were grateful that Tahira's situation did not call for intervention through mediation or our domestic violence programs. Later, Tahira was placed in our shelter and housing program, and she continued to work hard and build up her savings. A short 3 years later, she was able to apply to the first-time homeowners program in Fairfax County. Now, Tahira's family lives in her town house, and a few of her children are pursuing higher education, partially supported by scholarships through faith. They are well on their way to a much brighter future than Tahira ever imagined possible when she first came through our doors. I hope you will review our annual report to learn more about how we apply the holistic view of zakah from the Islamic tradition. This report is on your tables. That it shows that we have received about 2.49 million in revenue, and we served over 20,000 clients in 2021. We collaborate with the county. We have several volunteers who help us with a lot of food distributions we do and other programs, all our programs that help us. And we have now 13 housing units where we house these clients for 3 to maybe some even 5 years, and then we let them till they get on their feet. We don't let them go until they get to that place. And we also have an endowment, and which is in all, I would say 1.5 million. Zakat mandate is to bring self-sufficiency. It is not to give something, like little bit here, little bit there, but to bring self-sufficiency to every needy people. So, and this brings dignity and honor to the individual, to the families, and we serve with mercy, humility, and compassion.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mirza. Our third speaker today is also someone who's been with us in part of our conversations for the last 2 days. Fatema Mirza, she is co-founder of Worry Free Community, a social services organization with a focus on population health. It's a nonprofit that utilizes the health industry and provides competency building at the individual level and channels a wealth of experience at the corporate level to bring community resources and socioeconomic change to families and communities. She established the community health programs for Asian and Arab communities in the greater Chicago area to support coordination of care issues in the underserved elderly populations.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's really an honor to be among all the scholars. I'm no scholar, and I'm simply a student. And I learned, unfortunately, from experience, not even in the classrooms. That's even worse. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to share the story of Worry Free Community's inception and how we have adopted our values and what guided us. So it's quite an interesting story because I never intended to have a nonprofit organization. I was not in the nonprofit business. I volunteered a lot from a very beginning as a teenager, and then it kind of grew into social services passion just on the volunteer end, but nothing of the sort that I would have an organization or go into that. So I am from a healthcare background in different sectors, and back in 2005, I found a very interesting organization called Compassionate Care Networks who were doing screenings in the mosque communities, and I started to help them out. So having a corporate background, I tried to help the organization establish programs, procedures, standard operating procedures, and things like that. So anyways, that program developed, but then it was a screening program, and when Obamacare hit in 2010, they asked me to consult the physician community to see whether to sell their practice or not to sell the practice and things like that. So understanding the provider care challenges led me to the community. And so the Worry Free Community established not because I just want to have the setup to understand that there was no preconceived idea or notion about this. So one thing led to another. That's the whole beauty of that the becoming of the worry-free community. So essentially that while talking to the physicians and knowing their issues and concerns, that led my volunteer group popularity into many different sectors of greater Chicagoland area. So when the Obamacare opened in the fall of 2013, we were inundated with phone calls, not because we were any authority on healthcare or because people saw us as part of somebody who knows about healthcare and who knows about Obamacare. So knowing, and then I've known Obamacare in becoming for past 10 years actually, so had some understanding of where the law was going. And people were asking all types of questions, and I started to advise them, do this, do that. And I trained my friends and said that, you know what, this is the way to advise people, and let's actually start doing that. So that I said, we're just probably going to be doing this for about a couple of months, and these phone calls should have stopped because somebody should have stepped up and would take care of the need. And so the fall of 2013, we had numerous phone calls and started to guide people on how to enroll. To the extent that we were now sitting down and enrolling with people on the computer. And then we started to use our computers, and I'm like, this is now getting into a gray area. So I said, let me formalize this. Let's get you guys some certification so that we're not going outside the boundaries of healthcare legalities. So the volunteers became certified counselors. Now, and we kept doing that. I said, 4 months, it'll stop. 6 months, it'll stop. 8 months, it'll stop. No, it doesn't stop. The volume kept increasing and increasing. The first year, we served about 1,000 people, literally, and counseled about 3,000 of them. And in late 2014, when we were going into the second enrollment, I said, this is not going away after a year. So I said, okay, we need to formalize something. So in 2015, literally, we put the paperwork together. But prior to that, we said, why should we be doing this type of work when it doesn't give us anything? What is compelling us to help them? And we found out that, it was basically tawakkaltu ala Allah. And we said, you know what, our community needs it, we're going to do it. And that was literally our first guiding principle on which the community was founded. And then we said, what really are we doing? Are we looking for money? Are we looking for power? Are we looking for, what are we doing with this? So we said, you know what, we need to be very careful about this because it is innamal a'malu binniyat. So whatever seed we sow, that's what we are going to reap. So it wasn't really a lesson for us. It was more like a statement of fact. So we didn't know whether it was good or bad, and we didn't want to know that because we were simply helping people because they came to us. So we said we just have to be cognizant of exactly what we were sowing. Is it a tomato? Is it a cucumber? What is it that we are putting in? So we can expect that. And so that gave us the guidance to help people out in different poverty levels. Then we said, where do we draw the line? And really, or prior to that who should we be helping and how should we be helping? What are some of the best practices? And Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar literally became our guidelines. And then we said, where do we draw the line? And we said, you know what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put limits on everything. It's not what we can do, it's about what should we do. So literally every time we went back during the formative years, 2015, 2016, up until 2017, we kept asking ourselves these questions, and these 4 principles became our guiding principles. Tawakkaltu ala Allah, innamal a'malu binniyat, amri bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, and hudud Allah. We have to respect and we have to. So whatever we do, whatever program we design, whatever procedure we put, we instill these principles in that. So then we said, okay, we can't ask everybody to behave like that. This is us. This is core us. How do we interact with people? And we were looking for values. back in 2017, Dr. Asim Patela, the Initiative on Islam and Medicine, the executive director, he approached me and said that, would you like to be a part of PCOR project? I said, what is PCORI? So it turned out that it's a patient-centered outcomes research, and they actually have an engagement methodology with the community members, with the lay people or with the patients. So for the year 2018, 2019, and 2017 actually, were my learning years on how to engage the community and how to work with them. So we learn from them and we give it back. So we tell them these are some of the choices with these boundaries. And it's up to them to take care of that. We're not teaching anybody anything. We're simply facilitating what they want the outcomes to be. However, it has to be in their best interest, and it has to be in the communal interest. So we sat and we kept looking for values. We couldn't find it. We sought excellence, trust, and we looked into the Arabic words, the root words of our core value systems. We looked at the different types of, all types of things. And we said, you know what, none of this is working. So when I found out the PCORI engagement principles, they have 5 of them, and it was beautiful. It was sitting right there for us. And we adopted that as our values. We said, this is going to be our values, worry-free communities' values, because we are in a healthcare environment, because we serve that, and those values will guide us, will guide our patients to do that. So in a sense, this entire journey literally lived up to our mission. We build capacity at the individual level, help them out with their need. We channelize the experience at the organizational level. So we bring in resources and different organizations to help them create partnerships. And then we are aligning community resources to gather the data at the grassroots level and to support policymaking with it. So the 5 principles that we adopted from PCORI are actually, the first one is reciprocal relationship. So what is it that we in it for us, and what is it that you want? Let's have a reciprocity here, and it is a beautiful, beautiful process once you learn how to do it. It's not easy. We think we are into a mutually, or whenever we interact as a mutually beneficial relationship. It's not. Reciprocity has to be equal, it has to be understandable, it has to be adaptable, which it doesn't happen. So there's a lot of work that we needed to do, and my team is still working on that, and I'm still working on that. Every case is a case study for us. The second principle was co-learning. What is it that really I can learn from you? And that's where we begin. So understanding their situation, even though they may be saying something completely unethical, but where are they coming from? What is their motive? What are their biases? Let me learn exactly who you are. And then let's form a partnership, and then partnership is the third principle, to allow me to help you. So that is PCORI's third principle, but became our value system, part of our value system. And then the fourth principle was that transparency. We found out that we have to be completely transparent. And transparency goes in many different ways. I would never silence my status on my phone, because I want people to know where I am. I never would turn my phone off, or if people complain that you never pick up the phone. Yeah, because my attention was directed to one person. And when my attention is directed to one person, I can only talk to one person at a time. So literally that transparency held me accountable to my core inner self. It's a beautiful process. So it's not that I'm transparent to them, I'm transparent to myself. And I'm transparent to these two that are sitting on my shoulders. It's a beautiful process. And then the last two were honesty and trust. And honesty and trust, we have had many dialogues with the leadership consultants, And they said you have to take both as one value. You cannot separate these two into different. Honesty and trust always go together. I really wanted to separate the honesty from trust and have a 6-value system. Said you cannot do that. And then, so then honesty and trust, of course, I don't have to say much about it because Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the embodiment of honesty and trust and how that. But if we follow the first 4 principles, trust literally comes with it. You don't have to build it. You don't have to do anything for it. We have anywhere from 7,000 to 10,000 active members every year for who we serve on an ongoing basis. And we have about, I want to say about close to 30,000 people in our database that we have touched literally on a consultation basis. And outreach, our number reaches in hundreds of thousands. So we've touched many people in many different ways in these last 10 years, and it has been a beautiful, beautiful journey. But it all started with Tawakkaltu ala Allah. And by the way, I want to add to this that even though we have a nonprofit, we have not, during this course of time, we have not ever gone to anyone to ask for money. Not a single dime has been donated by anybody. We have been supported. We put a business model together that supports our work. And again, it's not the time to discuss the business model, but I would love to share that with anybody who would like to know. But then we have some grant fundings. So a lot of the times we create these resources come to us because it's Tawakkaltu ala Allah. And with that, thank you again for this opportunity, Maria.
It's my distinct honor to introduce our next 2 representatives. They're here to represent and share with us an organization called Believers Bailout. Dr. Maryam Kashani is a filmmaker and assistant professor in Gender and Women's Studies and Asian American Studies in the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Her forthcoming book, Medina by the Bay, An Ethics of Knowledge and Survival, is based on ethnographic research and filmmaking conducted with Muslim communities in the greater San Francisco Bay Area. Her films and video installations have been shown internationally, and she's currently working on 2 films at the moment. Alaghrabi is a PhD student in the field of Islamic Studies at the University of Chicago Divinity School. His research interests focus on issues of ethics and epistemology within Islamic philosophical theology and legal philosophy. And his work with the Believers Bailout has taken him to jails and ICE incarceration centers nationwide, and he works to help provide post-release support for many individuals returning to their community. And to quickly share a bit about Believers Bailout before they take the stage, it is a community-led effort to bail out Muslims in pre-trial incarceration and ICE custody. Based in Chicago, home to the largest single-site jail in the United States, Believers Bailout supports efforts to abolish money bail and to raise awareness within Muslim communities on the injustices of the bail bond system, immigration bonds, and the broader prison industrial complex of which they form part. Believers Bailout aim is to move towards a world rooted in accountability and healing rather than punitive responses of the police and prisons. They seek to create sustainable change in our society by focusing on 3 major areas of concern: the prison industrial complex, anti-Muslim racism, and anti-blackness. Please welcome Dr. Maryam Kashani and Alla.
Assalamu alaikum. How's everybody doing? Good? Great. Thank you all for inviting us, and it's been a really beneficial 2 days of thinking about ethics and community and self. So you really benefited, and we're really grateful that you allowed us to come here and share our work. So as Professor Nain mentioned, Believers Bailout is a collective community effort to bail out Muslims from jails and immigration detention centers. We started in Chicago and Illinois, but we do our work now spread to different states. And we started around 2017, 2018, basically a collective of scholars and community members that were kind of discomforted and displeased and motivated to sort of intervene in to kind of resolve the three major problematic network of policies, institutions, which is basically the president-industrial complex and anti-Muslim racism and anti-blackness. And we thought about where can we intervene in a way that is tangible and effective and builds on other organizations and their work, and working from an abolitionist framework to sort of abolish bail system. That was something that is concrete, and we could kind of intervene, and that touches on all these three things in a way that the bail system and the prison system is both inherently racist and inherently Islamophobic and problematic in many ways. We can speak about it for ages, but that was kind of our goal. And I don't know how much people know about the bail system or about abolition. You guys know what bail system is? Does people know? So bail system, basically, people, when they get, for example, arrested, they go to a jail and they haven't been convicted yet. And they get these amount of bonds, basically, an amount of money that they have to pay in order to not be incarcerated. So, and people get egregious amount of bail amount. And many of those people who are, you spoke a lot about poverty and economic inequity. Many of the people who get arrested are people who are extremely poor. And so you have the system that kind of almost is a form of captivity and slavery. And so, they're not convicted yet, and they remain there for years. And we have many stories. You start talking about people that we worked with, and so it's kind of a form of bondage, basically. And so that's kind of the bail system, and that's kind of something that we've been trying to organize to abolish. And I want to also speak a little bit about abolition. We are an abolitionist organization that is both sort of motivated by Islamic values. And also our way of organizing is also, in a sense, employs, we'll talk about how we use zakah as a sort of organizing strategy. And so abolition, a scholar and an organizer based in Chicago, Maryam has this kind of really useful way of explaining abolition. And it's basically abolition as a political vision and as a structural analysis of oppression, and then as a practical organizing strategy. So when you talk about political vision, we're trying to rethink or imagine a world where harm is not addressed through punitive measures, but through transformative forms of community responsibility and healing. And so it's about imagining a world in which this is addressed without prisons and without policing. And so that's kind of the political visionary aspect of abolition. And then there is a structural analysis of oppression. So how do we analyze oppressive measures, whether economic, whether racial, and we can talk about how economic inequality, racial capitalism kind of comes together in the analysis of abolitionist work. And so it's a form of understanding and analyzing the structural elements of oppression that produces prisons, that produces all of these forms of policing. And so that's the kind of the structural analysis. And then it's also a practical organizing strategy. And we have found ourselves, we participate with other partners in all these kind of spheres of abolition, but I think zakah has been very, very useful for us in a way where we are able to sort of strategically organize around zakah. And as mentioned earlier, and we talked about that in the past few days, people held in jails and immigration detention centers simply because they can't really afford to pay their bail is a form of captivity. It's a bondage, and also there are people who end up in these positions that are extremely poor, and so all these kind of categories are categories that zakah addresses, right? And so we try to imagine or think about these categories from a contemporary perspective. So being in bondage is, as you guys know, the eight categories of zakah. One of them is, that it's fakkur riqab is a major category of people kind of freeing people from bondage and captivity and slavery, and then also fuqara and masakin. And so people that we work with are kind of meet those multiple levels of zakat categories. And so we worked initially in partnership, and we still do that, with Taiba Foundation in Southern California, who really helped us with this process of thinking about zakah and zakah eligibility. And they also, Taiba Foundation also, serve Muslim, incarcerated Muslims. They do post-release support as well. And so it's been a way for us to think about zakah from that framework of organizing strategy. And our hope is that to ensure that people are, we restore, it's almost like an attempt to restore people's presumption of innocence, right? And we don't want people to remain in jail simply because they can't afford to pay their bail. So it's a way in which we can work through abolition using an Islamic concept that is really not abstract, but very practical and useful. And it could, there are other organizations that are bail funds. We are a bail fund, but zakah has been very, very instrumental in our work towards abolition. So that's kind of main things that we do. I mean, obviously we do post-release support, so we not only bail people out from jails, but after that we try to ensure that people have as much of a healing environment, a safe environment whereby they're able to sort of survive the traumatic experience that they've gone through, and ensure that they're as far as possible from violence and all of these structural elements that produces the incarceration in the first place. And it's a big thing. It's a lot of work to do for us, and we're moving into many interesting directions, and we could speak about our kind of these directions that we're moving forward. But I'm happy to hear questions later and talk to you about our organization, and hopefully you think about your communities and where you come from, and to reproduce. It doesn't take much. It takes about a few committed members, and there's already a structure for it, and there's many, we've heard of a lot of organizations that try to kind of reproduce our work, and it's very much needed. But thank you so much. And I think he'll
speak for a few more minutes. So thank you, Maria and Martin, for inviting us here. It's been a real pleasure to be in these conversations. Bismillah. So I wanted to sort of step back a little bit to give a context for why Believers Bailout was established. And so we live in a carceral society, and though I'm going to speak specifically to the statistics of the United States, as I've said in earlier spaces, I think increasingly the U.S. has exported its carceral approach and mentality globally. And so what does this actually mean? It means that we live in a society that governs our behavior, our geographies, and our social relations through the logics of punishment, prisons, policing, and surveillance. Studies have shown that as early as preschool, Black and brown children are criminalized and punished. Their behavior is judged more often and more harshly than white children. And this has a profound effect on all children's understandings of race, gender, schooling, and most importantly, their selves. We live in a society that spends over $182 billion a year on this system of mass incarceration, which is not really massively targeted. It's actually very specifically targeted. From the $80 billion on prisons, jails, parole, and probation, to the $63 billion on policing, to the $3 billion that families are spending trying to maintain contact with their loved ones through phone calls and buying food and supplies for them through prison commissaries. This $3 billion a year that is primarily from lower income families does not include what families are paying to bond their loved ones out of jails or for their legal costs. The $180 billion or $182 billion that we are spending also doesn't include the billions of dollars the federal government spends on building walls and detention of migrants. These numbers can be overwhelming, but I think they are important to think about because they lay out the terrain of our sacred struggle. We don't intend to live in a carceral society, and the community that our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, created was not governed by criminality nor punishment. How do we practice our faith under such conditions? How are we called upon to respond? And can you imagine what else we could do with $180 billion a year? And can you imagine a society that doesn't think putting people in cages was a solution to poverty, mental health, and substance abuse issues, political differences, and other social ills? Can we imagine a society where women and children were so valued that crimes against them wouldn't occur at the staggering rates in which they currently do? And in which personal and corporate property wouldn't have more value than the time and the relations that are extracted from people and their families, their abilities to work or study, and their freedom, right? Because the thing that is being taken, right, is a person from their community, and it's also the whole relationship that goes with it. So people often say when one member of a family or community is incarcerated, everyone who cares about them and depends on them is incarcerated with them, right? And also one of the things, like we've actually been really successful in being part of a larger coalition that's ending money bond in the state of Illinois. But what we're really concerned about now is electronic monitoring. So this is where people get these anklets and their movements are restricted. And while it's really wonderful that they're no longer sitting in a cage and they can be with their families, this also puts an immense amount of pressure on the family, right? That this person can no longer perform tasks like going to get groceries, doing childcare, very basic things that a family sort of, as a member of a family, you're sort of expected to do. They can no longer do that. So that puts a lot of sort of mental stress on the family themselves. In February 1965, Al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, our great ancestor Malcolm X, made a number of speeches in which he talked about brotherhood, how Islam is a religion of brotherhood, and as our Quran and countless hadith remind us, quote, "The believers, men and women, are protectors of one another. They enjoin what is just and forbid evil. They observe regular prayers, practice regular charity, and obey Allah and His Messenger. On them will Allah pour His mercy, for Allah is exalted in power, wise." We have rights and responsibilities on each other, and what al-Shabazz recognized was that brotherhood isn't exercised in the United States. His cause was to enjoin what is just, to forbid what is evil. Racism and anti-blackness being the predominant way it is exercised in this country and increasingly throughout the world, being one of the foundational evils of this nation. And that al-Shabazz actually thought that Islam would be the solution to racism. I think we are really failing here, right? There's a lot more work to be done on that. And I think it's really important that he, as someone who experienced prisons, could see that, right? That he could see that Islam was a way to really heal and redeem this country. And I think, and this is something that I'm really trying for us to think more about, is what kind of knowledge comes out of the prisons, right? Islam is actually one of the great miracles of Islam is how it assists people in surviving jails and prisons and incarceration, and also how many people it brings to Islam, right? In these circumstances. And I think I think there's a lot of research that can be done, but I think a lot of the knowledge is actually there, right? And I think more often than not, this is something Dr. Mattson said, that we get in the way of that quite often, right? So many times that we've talked to the brothers and sisters that work with us and that we've bailed out, where like it was just such a struggle to get Muslim organizations to give money and trust to people who actually knew what they were talking about. And I think as we think more about what the ethics of this work is, I think we also have to think about the modalities in which we do the work and sometimes get out of the way, right? One of the things that I'm most proud about with Believers Bailout is that I think we've actually helped transform the conversation in Muslim communities to actually think more about incarceration and the prison industrial complex. But it also saddens me that Black Muslims have been doing this work since, since the 20th century, early 20th century, and then it took a little scrappy group like Believers Bailout to really bring it out into more of a Muslim mainstream. And even then, not a lot of people know about us. But the fact that since we started in 2018, we've had about 4,000 regular donors a year, and that we've moved over $1 million to free about over 100 people from these both forms of detention is really significant. And I was looking at the numbers of one of the other groups, and it was like they'd raised over $2 million and helped 20,000 people. And I think it really speaks to like the magnitude of this issue too, that we're putting a lot of money in a system that we don't believe in, and which is why for us it's also really important that we don't stop with this kind of work, is that we chose money bail because it was a way to raise zakat, to utilize a tool Islam has given us to address a larger issue and actually be able to come to spaces like these to educate people. Because what we really need is for Muslims as a mass group of people with a lot of possibility, finances, power, education, to really join the abolition movement that already exists, right? This is totally against our religion. Like, there's no way anyone can justify the fact that 1 out of 4 young white people, 1 out of 3 young Black people is arrested in their lifetime in the United States, like before they're 23. Like, that's just crazy, right? Like, there's all these statistics, like Chicago spends like 67% of its budget on policing, right? Has it helped? No, right? Like, we keep giving money to a system that hasn't demonstrated that it actually works, right? So I could kind of go on and on, but I'm gonna stop here. And I think one other thing that I wanted to say is that, this panel was titled Charity. I think I would really like to see us move away from using that translation for sadaqah. The root of the word is based on relation and trust. And I think we should rethink what it means to give ourselves, of our time, of our wealth, to really think about the relationship, the trust that's been given if you have wealth, right, by Allah. It's not ours, right? And also to think about who actually knows about what should be done with that money. I read an article this morning from the New York Times about a young woman who's about to inherit 8 figures of wealth, and she actually wants it to be taxed because she's like, just because I'm about to inherit this money doesn't mean I know what actually should be done with it, right? I don't know that because the way that our government spends money on militarization and policing, I don't know if that's necessarily our solution, but I do want to challenge philanthropists to actually trust that other people might know better what to do with their money, right? So I will leave it there.
Thank you to our 5 presenters for sharing your important work that's been done great things and is ongoing. At this time, we wanted to open the conversation up to all the people here today, the conference participants, people who are joining us for the plenary. I'm sure there's many questions that have been raised as we listen to the good work that's being done here. So I do want to open the floor to people's inquiries, questions about what we've heard today. Yes, please.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Muhammad, and Jazakumullah khair. These are very inspiring interventions, all of them, and very insightful in so many different ways. My question to Dr. Yaqub with regard to all the amazing work that you've been doing in different aspects in helping the community, would be interesting to know if you have any contribution at the policy level where you could make a difference to the Muslim community with politics at the Capitol Hill, at forming any kind of legislatives could be helped to Muslim communities in regard to different issues like migration, like different issues related to Muslim community, and to believers bail out within the same thing, within every efforts that you're doing. Do you have any contribution at the policy level to make any difference, not only getting people out of the prisons, but making difference in the policy? Thank you very much, and Jazakallah khair.
Shall I answer? Please. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the question. As you can tell from my presentation, I personally don't do much work, but we support and help other people to do the work. So we do support many groups who are involved in policy. Personally, we have a very good relationship with the politicians, and we meet with them at different levels and talk to them. But it is through the organizations which are involved in such a work, we simply provide them the funding. So in many ways, we act as a feeder organization, and they do the work. It's very crucial at different levels. You know, it's interesting. I can share with you a story, but don't take it, I'm bragging. When President Obama was president, his chief of staff, Dennis McDonough, invited us to visit the White House, and we went. He's a very strong Catholic. I shared my book with him, and we talked about creating banking for unbanked. There are about 40 million people in America who don't have a bank account. So he was very touched. He said, that's the usury, and we need to do something about it. So that was the interaction. Then I saw him at a different event. And then there was a judge to be appointed in New Jersey. And he picked a Muslim judge to be appointed. And he told my daughter that this is because your parents visited, and I was able to interact with them, and so on and so forth. So it's not a policy close to policy, but it is the way you kind of hold yourself out, and you influence the people. So that's really. But we act as a feeder organization and help many such organizations to do that. This one congresswoman, she could not make it, and Maria could not see her in the lunch. She had a COVID. We support her. She came to our office several times, had lunch with us, fundraiser. And she was on the forefront in the Lisa Massa for food from Dubai prison. And she really fought for it very, very hard. We had another person, a Virginia Senator, Jennifer Basco. She was there at lunch. She's always available to us for any such activity or such request we have. So that's what we do. I'm not sure I've answered your question, but there is so much to be done. I mean, it's just that I personally am not into politics. My core focus is businesses generate money for all these charitable activities. Thank you.
So people generally think that Believers Bailout is like a multi-person staffed group with lots of resources. We're all volunteer, and there's maybe like 6 of us who are the core intellectual collective, leadership collective, and then we have about like 10 to 20 volunteers. And so, but we also really believe that it's important to change the laws and the system itself rather than just kind of feeding it. So what we have been doing is that we partner with a number of organizations that are more based around doing advocacy work. And so that's part of how we've been able to be a part of a coalition that's changing the laws in the state of Illinois. Also, I think a big part of our advocacy is just doing education for our Muslim communities, right? To start rethinking our sort of complicity with the system as it stands now. One of the things I wanted to mention that I didn't earlier was that I think people have an image of who they think is in jails and prisons, and I want to dispel that image, right? We have bailed people out from every ethnic, racial group, right, in the community, and the folks in ICE detention are coming from all over the historical Muslim world, majority and minority. Muslims get much higher bail amounts in the ICE system. especially Palestinians and Black Africans. So I think that's something people need to be aware of. We're about to make our first full-time hires, so maybe some of our advocacy work will change, but we're also really set on not being incorporated into the criminal justice system or criminal punishment system. A number of bail funds have actually folded because courts started sort of working them into the way that they were doing bail, and I think that's also really dangerous. So we're very conscious of maintaining our sort of independence outside of the system while also recognizing that sometimes there are partners. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all for very inspiring work that you are doing. So my question is directed to Dr. Yaqub. So I noticed that in your speech you used the term Islamic ethics a number of times, and I'm just curious to learn how you understand this term. So that's my first question, and the second question, anyone can take it, is about scholars who work on Islamic ethics. So I was wondering, given where you are, the kind of work you do you feel like there's scholars who work on Muslim ethics or Islamic ethics, they can help you further your work, or do you think it's simply irrelevant, or there's no relationship between the scholarly works on Islamic ethics and the work that you do? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I use Islamic ethics learning from Professor Maryam. She used it, so I used it. But I'm always learning from different scholars. We had the opportunity to host many, many scholars, and it's a good learning experience every day. And through my own research, on my own studies, but I understand Islamic ethics, I practice it. But I also refer to ethics in other religions. They also have ethics like Christianity and Judaism and so on and so forth. And my role, chairing the Investment Endowment Committee in Shenandoah University, is a Methodist Church affiliated university, and a Muslim is managing their assets. So I told them, what about faith-based investing? And they said, well, what about it? I said, well, teach me how Methodist Church would invest their assets. And I took the time to learn how Methodist Church would invest the money. So I brought it back to them. It turned out 95% is the way I would invest and they would invest. We could not agree on bonds because they invest in money market and bond, but we don't. So it's an evolving process, and I'm open to learning from scholars like all of you. And maybe something I'm doing is not right and I'm willing to change. So my understanding from my parents, through my education, through the scholars, and I have the opportunity to interact with many, many scholars. What I know, I practice it. Thank you.
I know you try to get the money to bail them out, right? But after that, they need a lot of support and development and the trauma they went through. And then I'm sure you know that they can't drive for a while. They cannot hold it for a year, I think, in our area, the driver's license. And, there are a lot of difficulties in there to get a job and all that thing. So are you equipped to deal with that, or you stop at that point?
No, it's a serious problem, and that's why we try to sort of emphasize how there are structural, elements to the reason why people are incarcerated, and it's poverty and lack of, movement, and where people geographically are located, and the people already are poor and needy, and so that's kind of sending them, bailing people out is a great thing, but ensuring that they survive after is incredibly important, and it's been challenging. I mean, we do post-release support, and we try to ensure that people have some basic support, but again, we're a small organization, and that's been, last year has been really us thinking about how with our capacity, what can we do, right? And there's a major issue is housing. Where are people going back? I mean, what we can do is basically ensure that people have a home to go back, have a place. They're not Like we don't bail people if they don't have any contact person or a person they could be staying in. But then most of the time they go back to neighborhoods that are similar to the ones they came out of, and they're very very dangerous neighborhoods that kind of does not help. You're either at risk of violence, reincarceration again, substance abuse, all these, and the exact pressure of having to stay with a brother or having to stay with, it's very problematic. But then, how can we can't do everything, and so we're like, oh, can we invest in a housing thing? But then that's a whole big project, and there are organizations that do that, and our hope is to really now as we hire people is to think about how can we partner with other organizations that do, for example, housing, but then in Chicago there's all these, Iman is a good example. Iman, if you guys know about Iman, a Muslim organization in the south side of Chicago, been very helpful with us, but then also they are at capacity, so there's a need for all these organizations that could take, abolition is a collective work that is, it can be, it addresses all these structural elements: housing, economic inequality, and there's a lot of substance abuse. So there's so much to do, but that's been our kind of the challenge of what to do after we bail a person, and even what to do after. We talked about how we are participant in the coalition that end money bail. So once money bail ends, there is electronic monitoring, and that poses its own problem. And so there's always shifting, ways in which we can intervene, but definitely very, very challenging.
Can I add something?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I feel like we can't social service and charity our way out of the circumstances that we are currently in. I do think structural change is super necessary. Just to give you an example, so in Chicago, the city spends $4 million a day on police, $4 million a day on police. That would cover 32 months of violence prevention programs. It would cover 18 months of substance abuse treatment, which our community actually really needs, because people like to pretend that Muslims aren't drinking and taking drugs, and they are, and there's so few, if any, Muslim treatment programs for that, besides the Nation of Islam, which has been very successful. $4 million a day would also cover 5 months of mental health services, right? So these are such big problems. I don't want us to think that we can charity our way out of them. This is a real big structural issue. So yeah.
Thank you. Also to speak about the scholarship and what can scholars who are working in the academy, could do, could help, in terms of thinking about Islamic ethics. I think it's very, very important. It's, we're, from our perspective, for example, thinking about abolition and imprisonment, it's always interesting to think about how can Islam and the Islamic tradition have dealt with harm, right? And so, and also the notion of prison, there's people who would say there were some kind of imprisonment historically in the Islamic tradition, or the hudud or whatever. But then there's a whole different scholarship that needs to be done that understands that historical context and also understand our contemporary context. What a prison means now as opposed to a prison in the modern period. And so there's so many things that have changed. So I think scholars work in Islamic ethics had be also, there's there's a lot of scholarship on abolition, on incarceration, on the prison industrial complex. So there's so much to learn from scholars who are actually doing that work. So I recommend scholars working in Islamic ethics to actually really work with and learn from scholars who are working on contemporary American the prison industrial complex in America, and then that would eventually allow you to rethink how we can deal with harm, and how can we think about transformative justice from an Islamic perspective, but extremely important and useful alongside organizing and working doing tangible, on the street grasswork, organizing. Yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question also, not to put the onus for this on believers bailout. I know all the capacity issues that you have mentioned, but are there diversion programs and like DAs that is amenable to that, and then thinking around what an Muslim-run diversion program could look like? Is like some of the thinking and intellectual capacity at believers bailout sort of give way to that? In the Philadelphia area, some masajid mosques have been engaging with the DA, which is a more like, I think, a developed understanding of diversion programs. And many leaders say, hey, we already do diversion, right? So being at the mosque and in this space would already mean like that. But I'm finding it difficult to find a cooked out sort of understanding of what it could look like organizationally, ethically, programmatically as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard one because I think also, again, I'm going to go back to structure because that's what I see. You can divert someone and sort of change their thinking about what is possible, but unless you actually make things possible, it's going to be really hard. There's been such an organized abandonment of neighborhoods and people in this country that, yeah, it's just going to require a lot of work. I think diversion is great. I think there's a lot of transformative justice work that's being done that Muslims should definitely take part in. This is something we were thinking about bringing more to Ingrid's work with Herma, right? That, when harm is always going to happen in our communities, right? The people hurt usually the people closest to them. That's usually where crimes happen. So it's not like we can create a world where that's not going to happen, but we do, even within our communities, have to get rid of some of the punitive ways we handle things, right? Whether it's cancel culture or silencing victims, centering the perpetrator, there's a lot we as a community can learn about transformative justice that actually serves everyone involved, that is actually oriented towards repairing our relations, repairing our community, right? I think there are a lot of people, the way we deal with our children is usually punishment oriented, right? How do we start changing the carceral mentalities that has really invaded our souls, right, and our hearts? Allah says, if people stopped committing sins, that community would be destroyed so another one could come so it could ask for forgiveness, right? So we know that that's a big part of who we are as Muslims, that we will sin. And the key is to figuring out forgiveness within the community and towards Allah, right? I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I mean, it does. And with alternative sentencing and all of those things, I think it's just a meaningful sort of process to invest in what our communities can offer to that. Is it something specific? Is it something different or similar? But yeah, especially where these opportunities exist, it's just I'm finding that we haven't invested in thinking about what it could look like such that we are able to offer proper alternatives.
Yeah.
I believe we have time for one more question. Oh, yes, son.
السلام عليكم. جزاكم الله خير جميعا for this. جزاكم الله خير for this excellent work across different communities and different ways of giving from the heart. I'm Sahar Khamis from University of Maryland, College Park. My question really is for the women on the panel. I want to talk about the gender dimension specifically. When there is time of need, like we saw, for example, in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and beyond, we're still living in the shadows of the pandemic, unfortunately. Women have really stepped up. Muslim women have had a leading role in society in terms of giving and charity. So I want the women on the panel, Dr. Tanveer, Sister Fatema, and Dr. Maryam, to maybe talk a little bit about what they perceive to be the role of Muslim women in particular, in terms of their gendered ways of knowing, doing, giving, caring, which I believe are very, very important. Thank you again, and Jazakumullah khair.
Sister, it's a very difficult question. But the thing is, the women are full of love and care, and they want to make a difference, right? Each and every one, young girl, you see them all, they want to do something good. So the Muslim women, I think, have a big role in showing that role of a Muslim woman who will come up and do a lot of stuff. So you can see here we are doing so different kinds of things, and there are many, many sisters who are doing at different levels and different things to help people. That's the main thing. The women and girls, they do want to help people. So I think you can think of any role, and that's where the help is needed. And I'm sure Muslim women will step up and do it. And of course, without the help of the brothers, it won't be a team. So we have to be whole and have the brothers and sisters together.
If I can just add, I feel Muslim sisters have a big role to play because financially speaking, they are better off than the men. Historically, if you look at the Muslim world, most of the endowments have been set up by the sisters because they first get the money as a mahar, then whatever they earn, it is their money, and poor husband like me have to support the wife. I mean, she can give me zakah, but I cannot give her zakah. And then Islam is the first organized religion which allows a Muslim woman or a woman to inherit as a daughter, as a wife, as a mother, and so on and so forth. So really, if you look at the whole thing, they end up with a lot more money than the men. And when I was writing my book, I did the research, and of course I'm sitting here with scholars. You know, in the Jewish faith, if there are sisters and a brother gets everything. In Christianity, really there's no clear concept of inheritance. But in our case, first time a woman has the right to inherit. And I did some calculations, really they end up to be much more richer than the men at the end of the 50 years or 40 years or whatever. So I think they have the obligation to give more charity than ourselves. Thank you.
And we deal both with the people who want to give and the people who need to have. So with respect to genders, and especially with respect to women, I think women has a much bigger role to play in this, bigger role in the sense that right now we especially in the new immigrant sector, there's quite a bit of population. When you are coming out here, you're tasked with basically household activities more than professional activities. So there is a sector, there is a set of population that has the resources in terms of time and in terms of effort they can put it in. I consider time, money, and effort are all interchangeable, and we only calculate the value in terms of monetary value or the dollar amount, but time has equal value, and money can be translated into time, and time can be translated into money, and like effort as well. So the amount of effort that women go through and do, I think they need to be more cognizant of attaching that effort with a purpose. So whatever they are doing, if they attach them in a particular category or with a purpose, for example, I want to donate my time to Believers Bailout. I mean, that's a beautiful cause, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, even in terms of this conference. The effort for so that we can channelize these things. And then of course, with respect to inheritance, routinely we are faced with, in consultations with the community members, we are faced with this question that, you know, my wife would be inheriting this much, she doesn't have anything right now, so she has, she's getting all the benefits, but would she keep getting benefits if she inherits the money? Or should I be donating this to my kid and they would look after my wife? So we definitely need some answers there, but I think there's a lot of room for growth.
Well, I think Islam blesses women with a lot of potential for wealth. Also, women and children are extremely poor in this country and globally. You know, I was just speaking to a woman the other day who, you know, her husband is incarcerated and she's at home with 5 children, right? And so what is she going to do? And so I think it's not an accident that a lot of the contemporary thinking about abolition is coming from women. It's coming from them because they are the ones who sometimes are the victims of violence from their loved ones, who are also incarcerated as survivors of violence, because that they know that oftentimes the person who they love has also hurt them, and they need another way to resolve this issue and to feel safe and secure and to repair, which is why they know that incarceration isn't working for them, right? And that calling a police officer when something happens between family members is not the best option we should be coming up with when it comes to this work, right? At the same time, we also need more men to do this work. At least for Believers Bailout, I think we're one of these few, one of the organizations in this particular criminal justice sector that is run by women. And I don't think it's an accident that we don't draw tons of young men to the work, right? There's a certain form of I don't want to say idolatry of male leadership, right? But there is a sense that charismatic male leadership, people will flock to that and support those kinds of leaders, whereas we run as mostly a kind of, women majority collective. And I thank Allah for the brothers that are doing this work. And we need more of them. Yeah.
I will have a few comments to close out this current plenary. But please join me in thanking our speakers today from these various organizations. We're not quite concluded. We have a lunch provided for everyone here to attend. That'll go from 1 till 2, and then at 2 o'clock for the final hour, we will have closing remarks from Dr. Mona Siddiqui and a final conversation for all of us who have been part of the gathering this past 2 days. So please help yourself to the lunch behind you, and please remain and join us for this final hour from 2 to 3.
Thank you so much.